Alright, should be a quick video on the economics channel. No brilliant comments here, but the Modern Mystic said, please use your money view to explain this chart. So he posted me a link to a Federal Reserve website chart, which I like the St. Louis Fed website. It's one of my favorites because it actually does have some information. So anyway, this is the excess reserves of depository institutions. And so in the middle of the 2008 recession, there's this huge jump, and it just keeps going up and up and up. And this is the amount of reserves that are held with the Fed from the member banks. Yeah, as I understand it. So it's at $2.4 trillion. And the catch is that in 2008, what changed from flat line to all of a sudden this, is that the Fed said, as it used to be, the Fed would pay interest on the reserves that were held from the member banks, would hold money with the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve would pay them interest on that money as if it was, just in case there's a run in the bank or something, they have money. That's what reserves mean, sort of. But that's technically not really what's going on. But anyway, and so any amount over the minimum number that the Fed was requiring, which is only $70 billion, so they're at $2.4 trillion, and the amount that the Fed required there to exist was $70 billion, so it's a lot different. But anyway, the reason why it jumped up is because they changed the law in the middle of that recession, the banking crisis, as part of the bailout and all that kind of crap. They came up with this scheme to pay banks interest on the excess reserve. So if they went over the $70 billion, they would still get interest paid to them on that money. And this has to do with, so these are the member banks, so it's like the gang of banks, and then these banks have all these other banks that funnel money into them to hold their reserves and to cover them each other when they have like if they're running short on money, they borrow the money in this overnight rate stuff. And so by having reserves, or these excess reserves, they don't have to pay fees for those transfers because they can have it as a reserve transfer. And the advantage of that is that they can transfer a huge amount of money. It's like not paying PayPal anymore, and they can have the money in these accounts that are actually bearing some interest. So it's sort of it doesn't make sense in the sense that they're only getting a small amount of interest, but it's like there's some multiplier thing in effect, and for banks there's an advantage to having this reserve accounts as a hedge against everything else going on in the economy. So it's essentially their way of diversifying. So they would own stock, and they would own mutual funds, and they'd own lots of stuff, or possess lots of stuff as equity. And one of the things they would want to possess is cash as one of the commodities. And this would be the best way to own cash, is cash that actually goes up in value instead of cash that doesn't do anything. So instead of actually owning a cash account, they can own a reserve account at the Fed and get interest. So the bad news is that we're spending a lot of money paying banks just to hold money in accounts, which is really kind of dumb. I mean, billions of dollars. And if the economy, something goes south, inflation-wise and otherwise, and interest rates actually have to go up, we're going to be paying them a lot of money. So unless they change this law. So but the real bottom line would be is that the banks are basically, by having the money in these reserve accounts, just an indication that they're not finding it very easy to loan money. So I guess that would be, they're not finding good clients for lending. And so that would be sort of why these reserve accounts are going up, is because they'd rather keep the money in the account than to lend it to assholes. So, and there's nobody left but assholes in the economy to lend money to. And that's sort of, I think, part of the explanation. But I don't know all the ins and outs of these reserve accounts, and who put the money there in the first place, and whose money it really is, or any of that kind of stuff. The bottom line is, though, is that yes, the reason why this happened is because they changed the law to pay interest on this happening. So they're rewarding this, and that's why it's happening. And it's to their advantage in terms of there's some double advantage. Not only do they get interest, but they can also now transfer money without paying interest for the transfers. And somehow the Fed did this to give themselves more control over interest rates, but they were just trying it. I don't even know if they think this is working or not, so they might change the law now that it's getting that high, and because maybe it's not working and maybe it's not doing what they thought it would do. And I can't say I know every in and out of it, but it's not, doesn't mean anything, and it's certainly not a counter argument to my argument that the banks don't print cash. Yeah, and they don't distribute cash that they don't have to pay back. Yeah, so that's enough. That's a response to him. That's my impression of the chart anyway. And it is an interesting concept, but I don't think it's meaningful. When banks can start making real money on loans again, because they can charge a higher interest rate, then these reserve numbers will go down. But till then, it's a safe bet for banks. It's one safe haven. It's one place to diversify your equity. Yeah, that's enough. That's probably enough. Okay. Yeah, I think so. I don't think there was anything on the other video significant. People don't, you know. It's kind of disappointing. There's just not many people in these kind of conversations. Not much being said, all kind of blah blah blah. But whatever. So anyway, there's a comment by this guy, Nick Dapp guy. Okay, we don't want cash and other conservative assets like gold to appreciate too rapidly. That's just a result of speculation. But don't you think it's fair to preserve purchasing power by holding precious metals? Well, by preserve purchasing power is a lot different, right? It's not really about preserving purchasing power. It's about preserving equity. There's a difference between your property maintaining its value and your property going up 10% a year. So as it has been, is that people have turned all this stuff into expectations of income. Surplus makes income now. Surplus doesn't just retain its value. So those are really weird expectations. When you have an expectation that something has no risk to it, essentially, or little risk, to go up in value and you to make an income off of it, well, yeah, that's not good. Why the love for Bitcoin, which is total speculative bubble with no intrinsic value? Well, the point I like about it is the fact that it has no intrinsic value. The fact that people are hoarding them is just laughable. I mean, haha on them. I'm just saying that the Bitcoin itself is okay as a currency. What's a joke is the assholes that are hoarding them. Well, I guess technically you'd have to say that part of the joke, I guess, would be the fact that they have these bizarre rules about how many Bitcoins will be created and all that kind of stuff, and so that creates this speculative market. In an ideal currency wouldn't have that limitation, so people who hoarded would lose money if they hoarded. And again, I'll make that argument that you want a currency that devalues a little bit each year. You don't want a currency that inflates in value. That's just really bad. So, yeah. Okay. I think I've covered it. Until next time. It's Such.